me, hopefully.
Absolutely, it will. I believe you. I think it will. And one thing, I've been doing training for my department for almost 4 years now. And I'll say, in my career, I've had the opportunity to do a lot of things in law enforcement, pretty much got to experience it all. But I will say that this is the most rewarding job that I've had in this field, to be able to provide the training that we do for our officers. And, like, for example, when you have a brand new officer come in that has zero experience, and you can see them come in with no experience and see them develop into a good police officer, to me, that is so rewarding. And that's why I love this job so much. So, with that being said, tell us about a challenging time or situation you or your company faced concerning training, but you persisted, you made the tough decisions, and now that once painful memory serves as an invaluable learning experience.
So first of all, my whole career in instructional design has been one learning experience after another. Every time I develop a course or put anything out there, I always sit afterwards and look back and think, what would we do differently if we could do it again? And that's that never-ending evolution that I talk about. I also tell people when we're working together, it will never be perfect. We've never, even a course that we've worked on for a year, 2 years, had the opportunity to run a couple of pilots and make changes. We still never sit back and think, yeah, we nailed that one 100%. There's always something in there. You think, oh, we could do this better. We could do that better. We could have done the test a little bit different, maybe more scenarios. So I guess one of the challenges to this is accepting that we never hit 100%. We're always kind of aiming for the best. And it's a never-ending learning experience. I always look back and think, all right, so how would I do this differently if we got to start this project all over again? And there's always lessons to be learned that I take forward into the next one. As far as challenging situation, the biggest challenge for me, I guess, has been spending too much time working with clients that basically don't value what an instructional designer brings to the table. So I worked with somebody for quite a while, way too long, who felt that they knew and understood training with only a 5-day course under their belt, and basically ignored or refused to listen to any of the advice that I gave. And in the end, we had a course with slides full of text and a lot of lecture, and basically nothing that I would have put out if I'd had my say. And so that sort of tied back to the integrity comment. The experience was extremely frustrating, and I learned at the end not to allow myself to end up in that position again, which ties back to the checking in and making sure that you're kind of okay with where you were. I stayed because I needed the money, and I was very new in business. But oddly enough, once I left that contract, it opened up time for more contracts that were better, and everything worked out in the end. And I realized that I stayed much longer in a situation basically where my work wasn't valued than I should have.
Yeah. Yeah, you brought up a really good point earlier, in that was, we're constantly or continuously learning in this field as law enforcement officers and as police instructors. The process never ends. Even like you said, with your instructional design, you may create the same course, multiple times, and it's going to be different every time because you're constantly improving that course over time based on feedback from your students, hopefully. So it's a continuous process. That's awesome. So what do you think is the most critical skill a police instructor needs to master in order to thrive today?
I think it's exactly what we were just talking about. It's having that growth mindset. Just understanding that there's always going to be more to learn. There's always opportunities for improvement. And that even though some of us have been doing this a long time, we can always learn from different people. My challenge has always been what I've run into is because I'm a civilian in this world, that a lot of the people I'll work with will just say, oh, you don't understand because you've never been a cop. And so they sort of shut down and they really miss out. It's a huge loss for them. If they were a little bit more open-minded and were willing to learn from me, they could basically learn a ton from what I've learned over the years, and I'm very willing to share when I'm working with clients and working with people to share my knowledge and essentially teach them how to do what I do or what all the theory is behind why I designed something that way. And so what I run across quite often is that people who are sort of closed to that because of their own ego, they end up missing out, and I end up missing out because our relationship ends up becoming very adversarial, and it's a difficult situation to work in. So I think really the instructors that kind of do the best and become the best instructors are the ones who are just really open to learning from everybody, whether it's outside of law enforcement, other law enforcement trainers, civilians, sort of everybody. I think they end up by far benefiting and becoming sort of the best trainers they can.
Yeah. That's one thing that I struggle with is, well, I'm trying to get past that, it's that the negative feedback. We're going to get the negative feedback, and we have to learn from the negative feedback. And that's how we improve our courses. We do, but we're never going to make everybody happy. So exactly. We have to have a level of forgiveness for ourselves. Like we can do one activity and 80% of the people will love it and 20% of the people are going to be like, I hated it. So we're always stuck with this balancing act of essentially trying to appeal to the most people we possibly can. It is hard though, and I try to step outside. I really have tried over the years to get better at not taking my work personally and just letting people kind of tear it down, because it's all open and people didn't like it. Okay, so we go back and we're going to try something different. So it's really sort of going in with that approach. But if 95% of the people like it and one person just really didn't want to be there that day and came in with a negative attitude and is going to say negative things, so we kind of have to figure out where is sort of the good feedback that we want to use and when we can basically kind of ignore it. Very good.
Because we can spin around forever trying to make everybody happy. We'll never get there.
Right. And that goes back to the perfection thing that you were talking about earlier. We're never going to get there.
Yeah.
It's a continuous process.
But some people will give great feedback. And hopefully if we're open to that, then we can improve our training with it.
Absolutely. So when it comes to developing and implementing effective training for police officers, in your opinion, what was one of the most influential lessons you ever learned from one of your mentors, and how did it help you become the leader that you are today, or the trainer that you are today?
Really everything for me was tied to that growth mindset and not getting into a battle of egos, I guess, with people. So I've learned to be open and to have my mind changed about what effective training looks like, even in the sense from the people who take courses, especially when we're pilot testing new courses. So I've had to learn to be open and listen to what people say, be objective about it, and then try to figure out how we can improve it. I love reading research and books on brain science, which I have a huge stack of them. Brain science and learning totally fascinates me. Even when we're doing interrogation, we're talking about how the brain encodes information and how we can recall that information and pull it back out. So even when we're working in law enforcement context, I'm still thinking in learning context all the time about, so how can we use this information? How can we better encode that? And how can we maximize people's ability to access that information at the exact moment that they need it? So I'm always looking for opportunities to try new methodologies. If someone's open to this micro-learning concept of resources, I'd love to work with them on it, because we keep talking about it, but I've yet to sort of get to work with an agency that was willing to sort of put it out there and actually try it. We just talk about it a lot. So I'm always looking kind of for that next opportunity to develop something that we've been looking at and haven't had to do. Virtual realities definitely starting to come to fruition. It was something we were talking about 5 years ago, and now we're seeing it sort of coming into law enforcement world. So there's, I'm certainly for myself, always looking forward to sort of the next thing and opportunities to work in different areas of training.
I saw something on virtual reality the other day that really, really impressed me. It was a video showing officers clearing a school,
Mm-hmm.
and I had to actually look at it again. I had to take a double take and say, was that a real officer? Because it was an action. It looked real, and these officers were clearing a school, and of course they had the virtual reality, masks on, and they had some kind of backpack thing, but it was pretty awesome because they were actually, to them, they were inside of a school clearing the school, but they weren't really inside of this school. It looked real to them.
Mm-hmm.
I find that amazing, and I think you're right. We're going to move toward that. Those things are so, like we're talking about technology, that kind of stuff. As far as change goes, we could really use that to benefit our officers.
Yeah, even when we look at like dry fire now, they can get so much more practice drawing guns, without being on the range, without having to spend all of that money on ammunition. For us, it's just availability of the range is a challenge. So I think, well, if we can get 200 or 300 more practices in just the motion of drawing and firing. So even some of the technology that's not as far as virtual reality, we're still working towards bringing in as a regular part of training. So it would be, I think that's coming potentially.
Mm-hmm.
The challenge with the virtual reality is getting the cost down, which is the same problem we have now today for the simulators. I think in Canada, there's only, as far as I know, I think 2 or 3 agencies that can actually afford simulators. Nobody else has them. So my concern is that virtual reality is going to hit the same wall, and that law enforcement is just not big enough to create that critical mass that they can spend millions developing these programs.
Exactly.
We almost need a worldwide effort to create these the programs that we need basically around the world to be purchasing it to get enough money put into it for them to invest the money to create it. That's my sort of concern, I guess, with virtual reality. It's easy for them to spend $1 million on a video game that they know they're going to sell tons to, but law enforcement it's a much harder sell.
Yeah, exactly. Think about that. There won't be many right now that would be able to afford it. Many agencies that could afford it right now. We just got a new driving simulator and use of force simulator at my department back in January, and very fortunate to have that. Mm-hmm. But like you said, even down here, there's not that many agencies that have that.
It's ideal, but. We may have to keep working with what we currently have available. That's our other challenge, is just functioning within the resources that we have.
Exactly. So in this final round, I'm going to go through and ask you to break down sort of your recipe of success for creating an effective course and the ingredients that help achieve those outcomes. So if there was a magic reset button as it relates to training, what systems would you go back and put into place sooner rather than later when it comes to course design?
It's those foundational pieces. My first job in training was with a brand new unit where none of us really had any experience. And so we all jumped in and started sort of working with the existing training, and then a year or two down the line, we got to look back and we realized everybody was developing things differently. All of our courses looked different. So we had a lot of issues sort of in the way they were presenting. Even if you put all these pieces, if you have 2 or 3 instructional designers, everything's still going to come out a bit different because we all do things our own way. But we really learned from that lesson 2 years in, and we looked back, was that we should have taken the time on the front end to actually put those foundational pieces in place in the beginning. You need to understand your process, have a sort of a documented curriculum design process that everybody knows, and a review process. Once it's not like we create training and that's it. It is done forever. We have to figure out when are we going to go back and review that training and update it. So there's sort of a lot of things that end